If there's one thing that separates video games from other media like film and television, it's the element of interactivity with the audience in the form of the player. This interaction is foundational to having gameplay in games, but it can also be a vital element to storytelling, allowing games to tell stories no other medium can. Mostly no other medium. There's choose your own adventure novels and tabletop RPGs, but those are out of the scope of this discussion. What I mostly aim to talk about is choices in video games, and one of the most interesting variety of choices you can make is the moral choice. There's many games that explore morally gray, catch-22 areas, and let the player make their choices and see what sort of consequences they have for the story and the characters. But that's not what I want to talk about. There's plenty of games that have done the moral agonizing for you and clearly offer one choice as good and one choice as evil. And it's that evil choice I want to discuss and examine. Ultimately, it's because I enjoy making these evil choices, and because I just want to. I'll be covering games and topics in no particular order. Now join me.
And together, we can rule the galaxy as father and son.
I imagine the first thing that pops into a lot of people's minds when they think about evil in video games is one of those good-evil slider karma systems. Do good deeds, earn good points, and vice versa. I mostly think of BioWare RPGs like Mass Effect and Knights of the Old Republic, but there's countless examples like Fable, Infamous, Fallout, Red Dead Redemption, and so on. In some cases, it's a background statistic you can mostly ignore. It might have some impact on your ending, but as long as you aren't blatantly murdering people, and you're doing side quests and stuff, you'll get the good ending. In fact, you have to try really hard and go out of your way to be evil in some cases. The worst example of this I can think of is Fallout New Vegas. You can go around killing absolutely everything you see, and by the end of it, you're still a saint according to the karma system. This is because a lot of the killing you'll be doing is giving you good karma, and in particular, I think feral ghouls are bugged. If I recall, a developer's finger slipped, and they give you something like 10 good karma for each one you kill, instead of the usual 1. For reference, being a degenerate ghoul yourself and cannibalizing corpses only gives you 1 negative karma. So killing a flesh-eating zombie gives you the moral high ground to just eat those people yourself. Other games have their karma system take a more central role, and these can lead to some of the most entertaining evil moments you can have. Not because the evil acts themselves are enjoyable, but because of just how absurd some of the evil choices you could make are. Games like Fable and Knights of the Old Republic fall perfectly into this. Playing as a good character in these games falls into place quite as you'd expect. You save the indebted beggar from thugs coming to collect their money. You refuse what little reward he offers, and even agree to pay off his debt yourself. If you're evil, you kill the thugs because they looked at you funny, and you shank the beggar for his last $5. Your actions most often range from being a huge dick, to Patrick Bateman tier psychopath, and to human beetle, only interested in immediate gain with no long-term planning whatsoever. If you commit yourself to picking the evil option in these games, you're more often than not in for a comedic experience. I think this is often due to how karma systems are tied to gameplay elements. It becomes necessary to have opportunities to earn evil points to allow access for abilities and other such things. So for every good choice, you need an equivalent evil choice, regardless of whether or not it makes any sense. My favorite example comes from Knights of the Old Republic. Around the mid-game on Dantooine, there's a pair of wealthy families going through a dispute, while their children have a star-crossed lovers thing going on. You can figure out why the families are mad at each other, solve the mysterious disappearances of their loved ones, and bring the two families together to solve their differences. And that's the good thing. During the final scene, as a good guy, you explain that the disappearances of their children are not each other's fault, and they need to get along, yada yada. The evil option is to bring them together and then immediately lie for no goddamn reason, saying they killed each other's children, which they will immediately believe without proof and start attacking each other. The fathers and the children don't survive, and the remaining droids attack you too just because. If you have your good aligned companions with you, Carth and Bastila, they'll freak out on you for lying, but they won't stop you. In fact, they'll help you clean up the stragglers. Isn't having friends nice? There's no benefit to any of this either. It's just psychotic because you can be. Also, the fight against both sets of droids is more difficult than just fighting one or none of them. That seems to be a really common thing for evil playthroughs in these sorts of games too. As in, they tend to be more difficult than a good playthrough. I would guess this is the case because most of the time, evil playthroughs are done after a good playthrough and serve as a sort of New Game Plus or hard mode, but that's entirely speculation. What I do know is that this difficulty runs strangely contrary to what you might expect. To me at least, being evil comes with the expectation of trading human lives and suffering for easy wealth and power. Unfortunately, I usually find it reversed, where being evil gets you less access to resources and puts you in more difficult situations. The good guys are so much tougher than the bad sometimes that you often wonder why they even needed your help in the first place. Sometimes things make sense, like being evil lets you do bounty hunting missions, for instance, on Taris, but this is a rare occurrence. I also understand screwing people over is going to make you enemies in the long run, but the consequences should be just that, in the long run. If a game near the end gets much harder for an evil playthrough than a good one, I am actually all for that. I know I just gave KOTOR some shit, but I can say near the end of the game, they let you be properly evil. Without going into spoilers, you change from doing what a psychotic school bully might do to what an ambitious Dark Lord might do. Usually games like this, it involves seizing power for yourself, maybe killing off annoying characters, killing off who gets in your way, and so on. I will say, it tends to be quite satisfying after so much nonsense. Putting up with so much shit, and then finally getting to give the ultimate fuck you to all of it is highly enjoyable in its own way. Not every game fails to live up to these expectations though. I want to highlight an indie game called Infernax. It's a fairly short-length Castlevania-esque game with some RPG elements. I would say light if we were just talking about the level ups, which are fairly rudimentary, but what really makes this game special is the choices. Infernax gets good and evil right. You play as Alcidor, a former crusader made into a duke for his acts of heroism during the war, returning to his homeland after said war, only to find demonic creatures infesting the lands. After smashing your way through the first couple of zombies, you're greeted with this scene. A deformed villager begs you to kill him out of nowhere. Trying to help him is the good option. Killing him is the evil option. If you choose to kill him, you take him out. Alcidor, a holy crusader, doesn't feel great about this and hopes the gods will have mercy on him. A somewhat random but fitting in-character choice. Choosing to help him results in this. The man transforms into an early boss fight. Wow. And if it's your first time playing, it's not an easy fight either. These are the kind of choices I like to see. Being evil makes your life easier, and being good takes the effort and work. All of the early game choices are like this too. What's more is they do a great job of tempting you as the player. The early game of Infernax is pretty rough. You only start with 4 hit points, and many things can simply two-shot you. You want to buy upgrades as soon as you possibly can, but money is really scarce. What a great time to introduce you to the church's donation box. If you're good, you can give up some of your much-needed money. If you're evil, you can, as Duke, take the charity money for yourself. Get yourself a new suit of armor. It's going to let you take twice as many hits. Did the guards send you to deal with a bandit problem for cash? Sounds good. Now the bandit's bribing you to avoid punishment and promising to go away. Accept the bribe and turn in the quest. Now you have twice the gold reward. Even more so, it gives you access to a spell upgrade. If you did this the good way and killed the bandit, you get to change your basic shield spell into a shield that heals you for a small amount when you cast it. Well, that's nice. If you did this the evil way, you can upgrade your shield into a fire shield that shreds nearby enemies. This is honestly the best spell in the game. It decimates early game bosses way faster than you can with just your mace, and it protects you from annoying flying enemies that come at you at difficult to hit angles, protecting you from a lot of cheap deaths during dangerous platforming sections. The power boost you get from being evil in the early to mid game is very significant. As a good guy, there's even an encounter with the cult that you pissed off that gets a local shopkeeper killed. So if you want healing potions, which are very useful, you have to backtrack all the way back to the previous town. Early on, the temptation to be evil is real. It gives you money, it gives you power, and it's not wildly out of character for Alcidor either. His fall to evil isn't instant. It starts with petty corruption and then blooms into full-blown villainy. When he joins the cult proper, he even gets cool new gear that you can't get on the good path. I won't spoil it, but it's worth seeing for yourself. Appropriately, the hardest fight in the game is near the end of the evil path. Eventually, you do get your comeuppance for all of your wicked deeds. You're going to need all those powerful tools because you're going to have to fight the hero. I won't say any more. This isn't a proper review or anything, but if that sounds interesting to you, I'd say check the game out. This little indie game knows how to do the binary good and evil choices better than most AAA games I've played. I'd even recommend doing the evil path first as your first playthrough, because the good path's early game is just that much harder. Besides, even if it's not normally your thing, Infernax makes being evil fun.
You need to decide if behaving like that is worth it, my young friend. I'll leave it at that for now. But think about what I've said.
On the opposite end of that spectrum, Undertale tries to make being evil as painful as possible. And I love it to death. I'm of course mentioning Undertale's infamous genocide route. Most people I know that have played the game have either never started it or quit midway through for one reason or another. On a meta level, that's what the game is trying to do. Undertale throws everything it can at you to try and get you to give up your evil ways, and it often works. It tugs at your heartstrings by not just watching all the characters you've come to like die, but by making you pull the trigger. All the generic battles become frustratingly tedious and require you to grind out a big number of them before moving on. The upbeat music is replaced with eerie, slowed down tracks, and so on. It just keeps going. Despite all this, it's probably my favorite evil route ever made. It all comes together to create an experience and atmosphere that's difficult to explain. Sure, in a movie, you might feel sad that a character you like is dead. But in a game like this, you might feel even worse for having killed them yourself. On top of this, you're gaining a lot of power and just obliterate monsters in your path. You feel unstoppable, which combines with this intoxicating feeling of power and despair, knowing that all those fun characters are inevitably going to die. When a character begs you to stop, it's really you, the player, they're trying to break through to. It's remarkably different from watching two characters in a movie or show have this interaction. Sure, you can relate to one of the characters, but ultimately their choices are out of your control, and there will always be this degree of separation. When Papyrus believes anyone can be a good person, even you, and all you have to do is try, how does that affect you in the moment? You start the genocide route for your own reasons. Did you just want to see what the game had to offer? Did you want to fight the super boss at the end? So, do those reasons hold up in the face of all that pressure? At some point, Unless you just never cared to begin with, you'll hit an emotional wall that pits your resolve against how much you like the characters, or how you view yourself as a person even. Pushing through that wall, in my experience, came with a sort of catharsis to it. The internal conflict was resolved, and going forward, there wouldn't be any more. In my opinion, Papyrus deserved it the least, and if he had to die, sure as shit others aren't gonna make me guess twice. I also always find it fascinating to watch streamers go through this as well. A lot of them don't want to do it, but the voices in their heads keep telling them. Eventually they do, because good streamers follow orders, and chat is an entity of insatiable bloodlust. I also think this is something where you don't get the full experience unless you're playing the game. Watching it go down just isn't the same. Because when you're there, you've got to find your own reasons to push forward. Be it curiosity to see all the game's content, be it pride to be able to say, I finished this route. Whatever the reason, having it challenged emotionally like this is a fascinating experience. On a less meta level, Undertale really captures the power fantasy of being evil. Your perspective is firm as the antagonist of the story. It's your actions that drive the story and create the circumstances that the other characters react to. I find this infinitely more engaging than just being the bad guy that fights the other bad guys until taking over as the main bad guy yourself in the 11th hour, let's say. You might be a Dark Jedi in Knights of the Old Republic, but you're stuck doing hero work against the actual bad guy, Darth Malak, no matter what. It's the same story as the good route, just with a black coat of paint. Undertale's story changes completely. You go from being the central character, just trying to make it through all this chaos, to the central threat, completely upending everyone's prior plans and motivations. Everyone else starts trying to survive you, not you trying to survive the attacks from everyone else. Entire towns get abandoned when they hear you're coming. Notes are left behind, begging you not to hurt their families. Characters talk about trying to slow you down, not defeat you and enjoy their victory. If you get into it, it's a fun power trip. You're like a force of nature in the world, a storm that is approaching. A big... Chapter 2 of Deltarune was the only other game I got to experience that same level of villainy, where you take the reins as the major antagonist. It took 6 years to get there, but it scratches the same itch, and I couldn't find it anywhere else. Since it's pretty new, I will be covering spoilers, so click here if you want to skip them. Anyway, the Snowgrave route has a lot of that becoming the main villain appeal, as the Genocide route did in Undertale. The reason it has this quality is the detour you take from the main adventure to amass power for yourself and for Noelle, your minion. You ruin the lives of 2 teenagers and end the life of a 3rd, all to amass power for your own ends, which we don't know what those ends are yet. The icing on the cake is the final boss fight with Spamton. Not only do you get to flex some of that newly gained power by 1v1ing a boss you previously fought 3v1, the context of the fight just elevates the whole experience further. Spamton was a menace in the normal route, attacking you to steal your very soul. Now he takes on an almost anti-hero role in the Snowgrave route, just desperately trying to stop you from doing what you're going to do. It really gives you that I'm the true villain here experience. I'm sure there's other games that do this sort of thing. It's part of the reason I'm so fascinated by this subject and constantly want to look into it, into other games where you can play the bad guy. And it's part of the reason I'm making this video. I want to know some other games like this. There's obvious ones I have yet to try, namely Tyranny and Overlord, but from reviews I've seen, they're not quite what I'm imagining. Maybe, I'm not certain, I haven't played them. I have to try them myself. One game I did find, though, came from an Anon on 4chan several months back. a very obscure PlayStation 2 title called Soul Nomad and the World Eaters. What shocked me most about this game was that it recently got ported to Steam. I was convinced I was going to have to emulate this one because it's so old and obscure. Like, the only information I could find about this game anywhere was on GameFAQs. It's been a very long time since I've been on GameFAQs, and it felt like I was going through a deceased relative's belongings. Ugh. So what is this game? It's a tactics JRPG developed by Nippon Ichi Software, the guys behind the Disgaea series, which I've never played, but apparently Soul Nomad shares a lot of similarities, so if you have played Disgaea, you'll know what to expect. Anyway, where to start? The gameplay on this one seems straightforward, but it has a lot of underlying systems that aren't obvious at first. You control units and organize units into squads, and try to use your units to beat the enemy. But on the side, there's this whole Pokemon-esque type advantage thing going on you might never understand until dozens of hours into the game, because hearts and skulls, while giving you a decent idea, could mean a lot of things other than just type advantage. Anyway, I'm not really here to give a full-length review, so I'll just say the gameplay is mediocre. And if you like it, you already enjoy games similar. It's not going to change your mind on the genre. Story-wise, things don't fare much better. You're a plucky teenager, and declared the chosen one by your village elder, granted a demon sword and told to go save the world. The demon inside your sword is a complete edgelord, and naturally most of the people you meet along the way are also little teenagers, and you go save the world by killing God or some typical JRPG bullshit. The characters and the writing are usually subpar, so does this game have anything going for it? If you manage to push through all that bland for about 30 to 40 hours, you can reach New Game Plus. Here, you can start the demon route. When the old lady gives you a cursed sword and tells you it's your job to save the world, now you can instead say, "Shut up, Mom," and stab her to death.
Lady Lena! Lady Lena!
In fact, your first mission is slaughtering your whole village, including your childhood best friend. There's no going back from that. What follows is one of the most entertaining evil routes I've ever played. Obviously, the story is completely different, but in turn, so are the characters you can recruit. You not only get the support of some of the normal route's villains, but you also submit some of the heroic characters under your command by force. Some even get corrupted by the experience, going insane or breaking and come to the conclusion they like killing for its own sake, and they always have. You kill the head of a cult, not to disband it, but to put yourself on top as the new figurehead. And since you're using the overpowered Sword of Destiny to just start slaughtering whoever you want from the get-go, the powers that be start to take notice, and the plot flips on its head. Villains that were once scheming to take over are now working with everyone else trying to stop you. You're the major threat in the world right now, and it's one hell of a power trip. Their plans to take over are completely overshadowed by your plans to just destroy everything, and they're now forced into a more heroic role. Some of them even get celebrated as heroes for opposing you, and start to enjoy it, having this really interesting shift in character. Having to drag myself through a mediocre 30 to 40 hour main campaign, and getting to watch it all burn to the ground did feel kinda nice. Sitting that long for a pretty meh story built up a lot of contempt for it. Maybe I'm the edgelord. This game really scratches my psychotic itch. I wouldn't recommend it, however, unless you're like me and desperate for fun, evil playthroughs. You need a significant amount of patience to clear 40 hours of mediocre base game, and what comes after is really special, but probably not worth it. There's just not a whole lot of games that let you play the major villain of the story, and those that do typically have it only for a chapter. It seems that getting a proper story following the villain straight from the get-go is a pretty rare thing, which is a shame because people like villains. Just look at Senator Armstrong or Waluigi. This is where I'll leave the discussion for now. I've said the major things I've wanted to say, and I don't want to ramble on more than I already have. Thanks for watching. If you have any thoughts on the subject, I'd love to hear them, especially if you know of any games not mentioned here where you get to play as the major antagonist. Any stories you have of evil playthroughs would be great too, even if it's just how you decided to quit one early because you felt bad for being mean to the janitor. I'll see you next time, whenever that is.
This is the deal. You perform an act of great evil in my sight, and I'll pop open